Hello everyone, welcome to Painless Universal, a conversation with me, Anne Welsh. Today's conversation is one that is very inspirational, as always. So my conversation, in one way or the other, always motivates you. You find joy after you've listened to my conversation, because it shows no matter what you're doing, no matter who you are, you could always aspire to be greater. She's a sickle cell warrior, but she didn't stop there. She went on to do law. She went on to start her own little mini organization on a YouTube called Sickle Series, where she shares her inspirational stories about people. About first, she started with people, then she went on to herself about living with sickle cell disease and how you could overcome it, and challenges she finds along the way. And her focus, I've noticed, is really focused on the city, because the city working in the corporate job is very challenging, and anyone who's in that line of business will definitely understand it's not easy being there. So she is focused on this line of business, on advising people how to get into this corporate world and how to deal with challenges you will face along the way. Join my guest, Whitney, as she shares her story.
There have been occasions where my health has physically stopped me from performing my job because of absence from work, where I've been in hospital and just physically I'm unable to make it into the office. And initially I did feel a feeling of guilt, but now I understand that sickle cell is something that I can't control, and there will be occasions where I just can't make it into the office.
Welcome to Painless Universal, and I'm absolutely honored to have you. You inspire me in so many ways. I really had to reach out to you. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Just finished logging off for the day from working from
Wow.
home, and just about to start the new normal routine in the evenings.
Yeah. So Whitney, for those who don't know you, who haven't been to your social media page or don't know what you do, your YouTube channel as well, I did a brief introduction before we started, but I just wanted you to tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do, kind of.
Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
So, Whitney Joseph, I live and work in London. I was born and raised here in this city. I currently work as a banking and finance solicitor in a London law firm. And outside of work, I also run an online platform called The City Prescription, which I started really just to raise awareness of sickle cell in general, but with a particular focus on uh, living with sickle cell or a long-term health condition, and pursuing a career and progressing through academic studies as well.
Mhm.
Um, that's a little bit about me. And of course, one of the reasons I started the City Prescription was also because I have sickle cell disease myself, and just wanted to reach out to other people living with the conditions, particularly young people, and build a network of people that I can turn to for support, advice, tips, encouragement. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
So fascinating. I looked at your page and I think if I had you when I was 21, I would be so delighted, because I remember starting my job at Lehman Brothers. Did my master's, and after doing my master's, I was so nervous about getting a job and thinking what route will work best for me. And I ended up going through the disability route, because at the time there was nothing really understood about sickle cell. So they sort of I saw this at the career office at the when you go to the career fair, and I saw a sign that says disability program for the city, for the big banks and for law firms. I think, and I thought to myself, wow, this is a
Yeah,
big opportunity for me. I better apply, because I've always been nervous. I never worked in my life until I got my first job at the city, because I was always nervous about working.
yeah.
And there you are, you're talking about work. And how did you get your first job? How did this, we're having sickle cell. I mean, first, let's talk a little bit about your sickle cell. Is it really, does it come on often? And when you first diagnosed with it?
So I was diagnosed with sickle cell at 6 weeks old. So I suppose you could really say it was my parents that found out.
Oh gosh, yes, very early on.
Yes. So
Mm.
I can remember, I've always lived with this condition. Growing up, I always remember being told, you have this illness, this is how it might affect you now and later on in life. I suppose for the early part of my life, I didn't feel as though I had much ownership over that sickle cell, because growing up, I was really under the care of my parents.
Yeah.
So in the early days, I didn't have a great understanding of what the illness meant, how it would impact me as I grew up, and into adulthood in particular. It wasn't until I really got to about my late teens and started applying for universities that I really started to research what this condition was, and learn more about it. Health wise, I think my sickle cell has definitely been at its worst when I've been during education.
Mm.
So my triggers is pressure, stress, kind
Mm.
of environment. And I think, I suppose, during studying, I just put a lot of pressure on myself to perform really. I knew I wanted to go on to pursue a career, although I didn't always know it would be law, but I knew I wanted to go down the academic route.
Mm.
Um, During my school years, I really struggled, and lots of hospital admissions, crises, impacted me all throughout my school year. So I think I missed exams, I missed coursework deadlines, things like that, just time out of studies. Um, and that was really difficult. Since I've stopped studying, so my last form of studying was when I was in law school. Since then, I've managed to get it much more under control, and it generally impacts me slightly less now than it used to.
Mm.
Um, I don't have too many complications, but my biggest problem, as probably with many other people living with sickle cell, is just the unpredictable crises which you just can't
Yeah.
prevent.
Were you ever nervous about working, or did you have a job while you were in university?
Certainly. So whilst I was studying, and I was working part time, I had multiple jobs, kind of in and out of different things, most different jobs. So part time, I worked in retail, and I did some administrative work. I would volunteer, and I had brief spells of getting some legal experience,
Mm.
but I didn't have any permanent or full time roles. So I think, whilst I had experience in employment, I don't think that probably equipped me enough to go into the full-time working environment, especially in the city where the environment is much different to a part-time admin role whilst you're at university. Um, to answer your question, I think, which was I prepared? I don't think I was, unfortunately. I did what I could to try and prepare myself. So I spoke to my doctors, I spoke a lot with my parents, got general advice from tutors. But the difficulty for me was that I didn't know anyone else with sickle cell.
Oh.
Um, so actually, in terms of role models and in terms of aspiration, I really struggled because I didn't see anyone else like me in any of the career paths that I wanted to go down. Uh,
Mm.
that was a big deterrent for me. And actually, when I started working, I came across loads of complications. Again, probably the same as other people living with sickle cell, but it was a challenge trying to educate some of my employers, about what sickle cell is, how it might impact my work, what type of support they could offer me.
Mm.
So it was a big learning curve, I would say.
Wow. And so when you got the job in the city, was it something you always wanted to do, or did you have to compromise because of your sickle cell disorder?
Thankfully, I've never really had to compromise. I don't know if it's luck,
Mhm.
work hard enough, then luck. That's what happened to me. My first role in the city wasn't in the industry that I wanted. So, of course, I studied law at university and I went to law school, and that's where my interest was. But my first roles were actually in finance in the city.
Mm.
Um, so, whilst I did have to compromise, it wasn't due to my sickle cell.
Okay.
Um, I would say, however, that when I was deciding which law firms I wanted to work for, I did consider my sickle cell. Of course, the career in general is highly pressured, um, could be really long hours and quite demanding environment. But having said that, some firms and some environments are worse than others. So for me, as much as I knew I wanted to push myself, I also had to be realistic and working in what they refer to as a magic circle law firm might have been too much for me. Doing all-nighters, for example, and working international hours might have been too difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
I did take it into account when I was making my application.
Okay, I was going through your YouTube channel and your Instagram page. And for you, anyone who don't know, her Instagram page is the City Prescription. How did you get that name?
So it actually,
I love
um,
it.
thank you.
I love
Um,
it. Mm.
Initially, when I started my Instagram page, initially it was under a different hashtag. It was, sorry, a different handle. It was called Sick and in the City. Um, it wasn't necessarily designed for me to raise awareness. It was more set up so that I could follow other people living and working in the city who had all types of health conditions, because I was, as I mentioned, I didn't know anyone that had sickle cell, and I was really keen to meet more people and kind of see what their experiences were like, and hopefully draw some encouragement from them.
Mm.
Um, it grew, I suppose, it kind of uh, developed or built into the City Prescription. And actually, I was on a weekend trip in Paris, and kind of on the Eurostar there, the name just, the name just
Bum. There you go.
it's a combination of me trying to put together, yes, I'm career focused and I want to achieve and in my professional life, and I'm, I suppose, slightly ambitious in that regard, but my health plays a large impact, a large role in every decision I make, both in my personal and my professional life. And I think actually, if it hadn't been for my sickle cell, I don't even know if I would be where I am professionally right now. So I suppose it was trying to combine those two elements, my health and my career.
No, that's amazing. But aside from that, I'll definitely touch on the prescription later. Have you ever had be taken ill at work where or had an uncomfortable situation happen because of your sickle cell, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, there have been a few incidences where I suppose, for me being stubborn, I suppose you could say, wasn't necessarily feeling that well. I mean, anyone living with sickle cell sometimes will know that sometimes you have good days and bad days, and what might start out as I suppose, mild day, you think, okay, actually, I can push through, I can go into work, I can.
Yes.
Sometimes if it's late in the week, if it's a Thursday or Friday, you think, okay, I'll just go in for this Friday, and then it will be the weekend, and I'll rest.
Mm.
Um, so I just pushed myself too hard on some occasions and had to be actually sent home, twice. And whilst I would say it was uncomfortable for me, I think more of that felt more of that was an internal feeling that I had. My employers were actually really good in saying, you know, you don't look like you're well enough to be here. You need to go home, and we're actually advising you to leave.
Mm.
Whereas more embarrassed, you could say, because
Yeah.
I felt I wasn't able to perform. I was letting my team down. I was
Mm.
disappointing people. Um, and I suppose I worried how it would reflect when it came to appraisals and development in my role.
Mm.
Uh, Thankfully, as I said, my employers were really good. And actually, I think that speaks volumes for not only the firms that I worked for, but also the actual managers and supervisors that I had at the time,
Mm.
who were generally quite aware and quite conscious, not just of my health condition, but my well-being in general.
Yeah.
Uh, there have been other times where I haven't made it into work and I've had to call in sick. And again, you have the same fears. You know, maybe you were busy at work and there were things that you were due to do that day or that week. And I felt like I'm letting the team down, or I'm not able to do my job as well as somebody else. And again, fortunately, for the most part anyway, my employees have been relatively understanding.
Mm.
Um, all of those emotions are actually my own. Of course, there have been comments made. Thankfully, not at a leadership level, though. I found that the comments typically have come from colleagues or team
Mm.
members level, and that has been something that I have learned to deal with so far, and will still, no doubt, have to continue learning.
Mm.
How there, deciding between whether to let things go without saying anything, but also thinking actually those make me feel uncomfortable or shouldn't be said in the first place, and learning how to deal with them professionally.
Yeah, that's true. That's very, very true because whether we like it or not, people always make one or two comments. So it's all about, training yourself to, as long as it's not really directly affecting what you're doing, you just have to train yourself to do it and block it out and keep going. So have they had to make any special adjustment? Because I remember in my case, I'm very sensitive to the hot and cold weather.
Yeah.
It's just one thing that really bothers me. In your case, is there anything that they had to adjust or make it easier? Like, for example, mine also, because my days off were so unpredictable. So what they always asked me to do was to make sure I signed off every day was a sign off day. So in case you didn't come the next day, they knew where to continue from what I was working on. And my password was, well, I had a private password, but I also had a generic password on when I was working on generic things. In your case, was there any kind of adjustment made, or any of these organizations recognize that they needed to make it, or probably you're fine, you don't need it?
Yeah, I think sometimes I've had to have support, which is based on an individual circumstance, maybe if I've fallen ill on one particular occasion. But by and large, I think the biggest adjustment, if you can call it that, has been asking to work from home. Whereas sometimes it's not necessarily the firm policy, for especially someone like me. When I started out being quite junior, it was normally reserved for senior members of the team to work from home. But all things considered, that most firms found that quite a reasonable adjustment to make, and provided me with a laptop in some instances and a work that if I did need to work from home, as you said, it's quite unpredictable. I always had some equipment with me at home to do that. Another adjustment would have been, I suppose this isn't an adjustment per se, but just having someone in the firm, whether that's in HR or whether it's in my direct team, to discuss with if I'm not feeling great, if I think I might need some time out, or if on occasion where I haven't been able to plan it that in advance, and one more you're not well or fallen sick, gone into hospital, one point of contact, rather than having to reach out to individual supervisors or individual managers. I found that it's been quite useful to just have that one point of contact that I can say, look, I don't feel great today. Is it okay if I go home? And that message can be relayed to each person that I'm working with, rather than having to manage them all individually. Sometimes, especially in a law firm, you're working with multiple people, multiple partners at one time, and having to send an email to each of those partners to say that you're not well, particularly if you don't know how long you might take to recover, can be difficult. And I think when I'm not well, it's an added burden that I don't necessarily want to worry. So that has been something that most firms have put in place for me as well. So those are probably the two biggest adjustments. I suppose, as I said, the second one is less of an adjustment and more of an arrangement. Most firms have been quite supportive of those adjustments, possibly because they haven't been too difficult to implement.
Well, that's really wonderful. Okay, so we're going to go to the site and bit about your city prescription. And you started this platform. How is it doing? And what anyone who wants to be part of this platform, what is it about? Is it just for people with chronic illness, or just for people with sickle cell? Tell us more.
So as I said, it's really it's for both, whether you have sickle cell or any other long-term health condition, because actually some of the issues that we as sickle cell patients experience are relatable to people living with all types of illnesses and health conditions. For those that want to get involved, as you mentioned, we have a YouTube channel, and a few years ago I put together what I called the Sickle series, and we interviewed people living and working in a range of professions. We had a member of the NHS, we had a fellow lawyer of mine, I had someone who's actually self-employed. So we had a range of people come and share their experiences living and working with sickle cell, some of the challenges that they faced and how they were able to overcome those. The plan was to put together series 2. Unfortunately, with the current situation being on lockdown, it's a halt to our plans. But if anyone is interested in getting involved, as I said, with or without sickle cell, any if you feel that you can relate in any ways, we would love to hear more stories from everyone, across all professions, all walks of life, to show that particularly young people,
Mhm.
considering a career, yes, your health will play a part, but
Mm.
it not completely limit you in your ability to go into certain professions. And I think by seeing these stories, hearing people share their journey,
Mm.
um, it's that form of encouragement and also practical advice that you may need when you might not have access to that where you are.
I love that. You know, you're such a fascinating young lady because you just know what you want. You're so positive about it. Has there been a time when you've had your sickle crisis and you just felt like I can't do this anymore? And how have you overcome that feeling of overwhelmness from sickle cell that the sickle cell has brought to you?
Yes, certainly. So I think for me, dealing with my sickle cell, I think comes in two parts. The first is obviously the physical impact. So when I just can't get out of bed, will struggle to do the most basic tasks, kind of making something to eat, having a bath, things like that, especially if I'm in hospital when my physical ability is completely impacted.
Mm.
But the second part, and I suppose for me, one of the more frustrating parts is the mental well-being side of it, because actually sometimes there have been occasions where I've been in hospital and had a crisis, and actually a week later I'm back home and physically fine, or physically on the way to recovery, but actually mentally it takes me longer than a week to kind of pick myself back up. And that's really been difficult. And I think it's in those moments where I do feel overwhelmed, and I do feel sometimes slightly disheartened and defeated, and feeling like, oh my goodness, I've tried so hard to kind of deal with this illness and overcome it. But in those moments, it does feel slightly more like it's on top of me than I am on top of it. Um, I suppose to the things that help to pull me through in those moments is just trying to remain um, focused on what I want to achieve long term. In that moment, I'm going through something difficult, yes. And in that moment, it's challenging. As I said, it's overwhelming and it's defeating. But by looking towards the future and thinking about all of the things I still want to go on to achieve, and thinking, actually, this is hard right now, but I want those things in my future so much that I will get past this.
Mm.
Fortunately for me, I have a really good support network around me, with friends and family who are really good at trying to lift me up out of those moments where I'm kind of feeling a bit overwhelmed. But as I said, yeah, just focusing on the future, because sometimes it's easy to be stuck in that moment and feeling like this isn't possible. You know, I've worked so hard to get to this point, and maybe after all of this, sickle cell is about to defeat me. But actually, when I look back at over some of the things I've overcome, I think it didn't defeat me then, and it won't defeat me now. I just need to put one foot in front of the other and just take small steps, and with time I will overcome that moment. So as you said, it's not easy to remain positive all the time,
Mm.
but it's about trying to maintain some perspective. And just because it's difficult for a period, it doesn't mean it will be difficult forever.
That's very true. As we come to conclusion of this, I really enjoyed it. But one thing I want to ask you, because a lot of people with chronic illness, like myself, when I was at university, how can a person get a job in the city when they know they have these barriers? What
Yeah.
advice would you give them? As the city prescription would say, I'm coming to you for some prescription. I need to get a job at university. I mean, at work. I've just left university and I need to get a job now. But I'm so nervous about getting a job because of my chronic illness, and I know how it fluctuates. What advice would you give to them in terms of what to disclose to the employees, what kind of job they should be looking for, and how they should, manage their mindset with this? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
it's three different questions, but they all fall in one because you're my prescriber. Can you understand? What would you tell the younger generation, the 18-year-old, 21-year-old, looking for a job in the city, worried about their chronic illness?
Yeah. First things first, I would definitely say sit down and have a think about what it is you want out of your career. For some people, that might be economic rewards. So they might be thinking about how much money they're going to make. For other people, they might be thinking, actually, in the future, I want to start a family. So work-life balance is a key factor for me. It might be that you have a particular passion for a topic or a particular industry. You really have what it is you want to get out of your career. And then once you've made, I suppose, your shortlist, or you've decided on one particular job or one particular industry, I would, at that point onwards, first of all, don't let anyone else's opinions or perceptions on how they think you could thrive in that industry affect your own decisions. I remember that when I first said that I wanted to go into law, I had endless comments from people who were all very well intentioned, so medical profession, friends, family, all saying, you know, someone with sickle cell, is that really a career for you? But actually, I had to sit down and think about, how is my health, and do I feel as though this career is possible for me? And once I decided that the answer was yes, I really couldn't allow the doubts of other people to enter my mind in that way. So I definitely advise doing that first of all. Once you've made that decision, as I said, I think the next step is to really think practically about, if you were to go into that career, what type of support, or in which way would your sickle cell potentially affect you? So if that role that you're thinking of is quite physically exerting, it might be that you need extra breaks so that you're not you have a chance to recover. Or it might be that if you're up and about quite a lot, you need to have access to water so that dehydrated. Once you've got an idea about the practical support measures that you might need, I think it's so much easier when you are applying for jobs and approaching employers to actually say, I want to apply here. Yes, I do have this condition, but I think that with these support mechanisms in place, I could actually be a great employee, and I don't think that my health will impact me to the detriment of this role. Sometimes employers don't know much about sickle cell, so you may need to hold their hand in directing them and explaining how it will affect you in that role. So the more educated and the more prepared you are when you make your applications, the better it is for you and for the employee, because you can go into that role knowing, actually, I am prepared. Maybe it will be difficult, or maybe there might be certain challenges, but I've thought of all of these things, and these are all of the measures that are going to help me in that role. So that would probably be my advice. Sorry, it's a slightly long-winded answer.
No, it's not, because it really breaks it down. It's not at all. I really understood every part of it, what you said. Thank you. Because you really did, yeah, you broke it down, and I loved it. I love the way you summarize it, and I just can't believe it, how you just know how to help and the right message to say for someone with chronic illness. Because if I'd known things like this, what you're saying, it would have made such a big difference with my decision. You know, I went based on just me guessing. I was just guessing the whole way through, not speaking to anyone, because no one could really give me the right advice, because there was not that relationship with chronic illness and
Yeah.
getting a job. It was just do it the way everyone else was doing it, and
Yeah.
sometimes that's very, very challenging. I'm really grateful you took time out of your schedule to join me. And is there any final word of advice you want to give? I know your Instagram handle is the City Prescription. Your YouTube is the Sickle Series.
Yeah. So
That's the handle. The Sickle Series, yeah.
Yeah. And the title of the videos is called the Sickle Series. Yes.
Okay. All right. And yeah.
I would just say, first of all, as I mentioned, if anyone out there is interested in sharing their stories, please do get in touch. Once the situation is over, we will be trying to put together our series 2. So we will be looking for people, including yourself included, to share their stories and hopefully give some encouragement and advice to other people thinking of entering the same profession, or just looking for general advice on careers. I would also say, as a final word, in terms of just advice and encouragement, as I said, my journey, as with many others, is not without its challenges. It didn't come overnight, and I didn't know everything when I started out. So just take your time. Don't be easily defeated when you do encounter those challenges, as difficult as it is, and maybe as lengthy as it might be to get up and continue. Always do that. Having sickle cell, it might mean to get to to be, your journey might be more long-winded, or there might be more obstacles in the way than someone else, but it doesn't stop you from still reaching your end goal. So don't be defeated, and we're here if you need advice or anything.
Well, thank you so much, Whitney. I'm really honored to have you, and thank you so much for joining me on this platform, Painless Universal. And I'm sure our path will be crossing again soon once this whole thing is over. How have you been staying well with COVID-19? Has that, you managed it well?
Fortunately, it has gone well so far. So I think I'm quite looking forward to the end of the 12-week shielding period, although so much uncertainty about what we are and aren't allowed to do. Forward to that, so we can get back to traveling, so I can get back to working, family. But fortunately, my health has remained relatively stable throughout that time. Difficult because at the moment I'm not having any of my regular treatments because they don't fall under critical care. But I've just been trying to manage them as best as I can at home, and as I said, fortunately, so far so good. So hopefully it continues.
Thank you, Whitney, and speak to you again soon. Thank you.